At 6:17 local time, a Ukrainian drone boat of Barracuda type silently entered the river Dnipro near Krinky. It was heading to a Russian forward operating base loaded with fuel drums, crates of ammunition, and spare engines. A perfect target. It was an unpredictability that the Barracuda must endure first before it could come anywhere Russian. Friendly fire! When the drone cleared the final reads on the Ukrainian bank, it was in open water. A Ukrainian machine gun post 500 feet upriver swung almost instantly towards the heat source crossing the river. The operator, who was 14 miles away in a hardened bunker, froze his controls. The Barracuda sailed along on his own impetus, noiseless and naked. Somewhere above, a Ukrainian FPV quadcopter flew around at 1,000 feet, transmitting a friendly signal using a coded signal. The gunner raised his night vision goggles below and looked at the burning shape on the water. He had seconds. Get in too late and a Russian boat will sneak another night. Fire at too early a time, he would ruin his own mission. 5 seconds passed, then 7. Finally, the gunner saw it. A weak, flickering infrared strobe over the hull of the drone, one that Ukrainian forces were the only ones using. It resembled a way of knocking on a door in darkness. He lowered his weapon. The missile was spared its initial danger. This scene is not unusual as many people may think. During a night, when trading on a river filled with drones, a fast-moving heat signature appears the same whether it is a friendly one or an enemy one. A soldier will have possibly 3 seconds to make a decision. Slinch, and the foe gains ground. Make a wrong guess and you kill your own property. It is due to that identification is important. The Barracuda is not of any help at the very beginning. It is made of 18 feet of fiberglass composite, and it is riding only 16 inches above the water. Light enough to plane in speed, strong enough to take the rifle fire without being smashed to pieces. Its deep V hull cuts through chop-retaining radar reflections at a low level. It has almost no sound in its electric motor at patrolling speed. Before a boat comes anywhere within 200 feet, you will not hear it at 8 knots. When in full blast, you can make it go to 38 knots, faster than any manned boat on the river. A shaped charge weighing 35 kilograms is in the bow, even enough to tear open patrol boats or make a fuel depot a firestorm. And in case the control connection is destroyed entirely, the onboard GPS autopilot will be able to complete the mission on its own. This is not an enclosed boat with remote control. It is a weapon which is able to think on its own. That is why Ukrainian river outposts are based on 3 confirmations before holding fire. First, the corridor. The drone should be within the same lane that was briefed on during the turnover of watch. Second, the strobe. The infrared beacon should pulse the right coded pattern. Third, behavior. The Barracuda sails slowly in short, straight lines at 8 knots in hostile areas. Its wake is thin and is controlled. Russian sabotage boats go flying and zigzag as though trying to avoid being spotted. The signal has predictable movement. Right corridor, right code, right behavior. And it is sweet only at this point that the gunner allows it to pass. The Barracuda passed the last check and maneuvered through the transition channel. Familiar weapons were silent in rear of it. The dark river and electronic warfare and Russian eyes that were already looking over the water awaited. The easy part was over. When the Barracuda got into the mid-river channel, the regulations were reversed. Ukraine gunners were able to restrain fire. Electronics in Ukraine were unable. The drone boat forced its way to 14 knots. The FPV relay drone had flown above it, peering down at 1,300 feet and increasing its perception to that of a cameraman who was stepping back to see the entire picture. It was at that point that the video feed of the operator lagged. One frozen frame, a stutter, then motion again. Something was in between the signal. It was ironically not Russian jammering. Ukrainian electronic warfare teams bombard the riverbed with radio frequencies each night. The goal is simple: destroy Russian drones before they take friendly positions. The thing is that radio waves do not care about uniforms. They jam everything equally. Comrade, enemy, transmission line. The entire thing is put in a common E-blender. Electromagnetic corridors are non-safe in these areas. It only takes a single clean frequency of an enemy drone to squeeze through, and suddenly you are confronted with a swarm. Thus, both parties increase the volume and leave operators to address the outcomes. In the case of the Barracuda, they were felt instantly. The boat was not under direct control by the operator. 14 miles is an excessive distance, and the banks of the rivers are a jumble of reeds, sandbars, and flooded woods which eat radio signals. Electrical impulses are straight. Rivers do not. Rather, Ukraine has a relay chain. Ordering of the bunker via a fiber optic cable, the order is relayed to a hidden transmitter 8 miles behind the front line, then leaped into the sky in a 4-degree radio beam, direct to the FPV drone overhead. That drone is a flying cell tower that recasts the commands down to the Barracuda. The drone in question, which is the relay drone, is a highly customized DJI Matrix 300. It was originally designed as industrial inspection, but has become part of battlefield infrastructure. Thermal imager installed in place of cameras with a refresh rate of 60 frames per second. Payload replaced by signal repeater, 15 watts, directional antenna array. The additional weight reduces the flight time by 55 to 38 minutes, sufficient to catapult a Barracuda between the launch and the impact. It flies between 1,000 and 2,000 feet, sufficient to have a line of sight of both ends of the chain, close enough to remain under Russian long-range radar. The space between the safe altitude is a thin strip, such as walking under a low ceiling without standing up too quickly. But the most vulnerable link is not the drone, it's the boat. The antenna of the Barracuda is only 10 inches above the water. It is the last place on Earth to be heard on radio. Water reflects signals, reeds absorb them. The surface of the river transforms transmissions into simultaneous echoes, such as screaming into the cave of miracles. Put Ukrainian jamming on the top, and the receiver begins to hear garbage. The feed began to be broken in blocky pixels by the operator. The latency increased 4 times to almost half a second. By that time, he was not driving the boat. He was making conjectures about where it had been a minute ago, and praying the future was similar. The Barracuda has gone off course by 4 degrees. The pilot of the FPV responded immediately. He scrambled 200 feet and glided eastwards, raising the relay path out of the most obtrusive. The signal broke through, as had the raising of an antenna to get off the ground. Latency dropped. The feed snapped clear. The heading was corrected with 2 quick rudder tabs. Amiable jamming among them died away. The drone was on the point of being swallowed by the river. The Barracuda went down into the flooded forest and the world shut down. Both sides were 15 feet high with the reed walls which shut out moonlight and reduced the forward camera on the boat to a useless gray smear. Nothing could be seen at the water level. No horizon, no depth cues, just darkness and noise. The operator lost any interest in the nose camera and switched to the overhead feed. The thermal imager of the FPV drone had been replaced by an aerial view. It was an ugly sight, yet it was truthful. The sensor converted the difference in temperature into a map at 640 by 512 resolution with a refresh rate of 60 frames per second. Not shapes, heat. The logs were sunk in water, and it made them a little lighter than the river silt. Sandbars cooled faster. Sunken rubbish gave vague traces, as with fingerprints on glass. It was the contrast between viewing a slideshow and video live. Half a second made a difference in such a narrow passage. The Barracuda had been reduced to 6 knots. Speed here was the enemy. A submerged log might cut off the propeller shaft at 20 knots or turn the hull 1 over. At 6, the boat was still able to steer, but remain in place before something disastrous occurred. The fiberglass hull was like a snake in a field of tall grass. It wibbled its way instead of running.
Left, steady. Right, steady.
The FPV pilot requested corrections in 1-syllable form, in a flat and calm voice. No explanations, no drama, just directions. A shadowy white figure was floating by on the thermal feed, a waterlogged barge that was half-hulled and below the surface. Had the Barracuda not altered its original course, it would have rubbed off the wreck and probably cut its side. The channel was narrowed still further, 10 feet wide in places. The hull was brushed on each side by the reeds. The operator had to wait 200 feet as the FPV pilot maneuvered the boat through a hole that was barely wide enough. Then the reeds opened. The Barracuda came out into a broader channel. Deeper water, real current, room to maneuver, and exposure. The walls created by the reeds and the flooded wood blocked any view of almost everything, even the Russian observation drone. Out here, the channel was 300 feet broad and well mown on each side of the bank. The heat trace of the Barracuda was a flare. The FPV pilot saw it first. On thermal, 2,000 feet to the northeast, there is a tiny white dot, which is moving laterally. Then there came another, going around the Russian bank. These weren't birds, they were hunting patterns. They weren't alone anymore. The circling speck ceased to orbit and dived. An attack drone, a Russian FPV, fell out of 600 feet and was heading towards the Barracuda full speed. The operator had possibly 8 seconds at the normal speeds of attack, about 70 miles per hour.
Reduce throttle. Drift into the reeds, now.
Power cut instantly. The Barracuda was moving on momentum into a thick reed growth on the right bank. Its thermal signature cooled off in short order when not running. The shell went out of foliage and halted. A Buavel electronic warfare was already following the Russian drones 14 miles behind the war line. Externally, it resembled a modified tactical truck that had the antenna panels stuck on a rotating turret. It was something more specific within. These were phased array emitters, which could direct jamming energy in a small 30-degree beam, a flashlight beam rather than a floodlight. The elderly jammers would use shouting overall. Effective, but sloppy. And they gouged out the eyes of friendly as well as of enemy drones. Buavel worked differently. It listened first. Its digital receivers were examining the radio spectrum on a real-time basis, extracting the fingerprints of hostile signals amid the noise. When found, the system produced an interference that was specifically selected to the frequencies. The turret turned onto the bearing of 045. The first Russian drone started wobbling on the thermal display of the FPV pilot. Control inputs lagged. The image shook. 3 seconds afterward, it snouted and sunk into the river. The second drone attempted to get away by climbing, but was pursued by the Buavel operator following the drone with a smooth movement as the jamming cone stayed locked. It was the drone that whirled about and dropped 400 feet off the hiding place of the Barracuda. Silence returned. The operator waited a full 10 seconds, searching the thermal feed with movement. Nothing stirred. The Barracuda came oozing over the reeds and continued its progress. Ahead lay the final stretch, 800 feet of open water. On the opposite side, the target was white thermal, Russian outboard boats, pallets of fuel drums, tents that were warming like ovens. The sprint was about to begin. As soon as the Barracuda went out to open water, the video feed broke. Pixel blocks, frozen frames, latency spiked. Throttle instructions were saved rather than run. Russian jamming. A Sealock 01 attached to a vehicle in the left bank had been triggered and was flooding the passage. It struck surface vessels still more severely, being fitted to confuse artillery spotters and FPV drone aircraft. The problem was geometry. The FPV relay drone in the sky continued to pick the commands. It had altitude. The Barracuda did not. Signals were flung off the river and lost in the reeds and lost in the noise. The chain of relays, it was coming apart at its last joint. The FPV pilot did not wait to be told. He struggled to an elevation of 1,600 feet and turned eastwards. Interference is horizontally broadcasted by jammers. Similar to the majority of the systems, Sealock was blind at high points and at sharp angles. 8 seconds, the Barracuda ran with half-blind pace. The operator used the overhead thermal view alone, and he saw the white silhouette move on the screen. All corrections were informed guesses. Every second felt stretched. Then, the gap appeared. The relay broke through at 1,800 feet and 250 feet eastwards. Latency was set back to 1/10 of a second. The feed snapped sharp. Control returned. 700 feet separated the target and us. The throttle was pushed by the operator to the maximum. The electric motor shot and the Barracuda skipped soon, making 38 knots. Its wake flashed white on thermal as the hull moved across open water. The response of Russian soldiers was too slow. The boat made 100.5 feet an hour at that velocity. 300 feet, 200, 100. The operator discharged the controls at 40 feet. The molded missile exploded upon impact, tearing outwards and downwards. The closest outboard boat capsized entirely out of the water and broke when it was returning. The fuel drums burst, and by the time the fire stopped burning, a pillar of fire, 60 feet high, had been launched into the air. Supply shelters collapsed. There were sharp secondary explosions of ammunition that burnt. The pressure wave shook the FPV drone and was stabilized, after which it continued recording. By the time the smoke had cleared, there was no river base, boats destroyed, supplies burned, the staging point erased. The Barracuda had completed the task by himself. You have witnessed the way one drone boat was able to get through the multi-layered defenses, electronic warfare, and human decision-making. But it is not destruction, but the visible result. Behind this, it is a real story of the system. Get them before the next breakdown and give your opinion in the comments section. Low-cost, smart weapons have the capability to reason, conceal themselves, and complete missions unassisted. Do you think electronic supremacy will determine future warfare on rivers and along coasts, or will the machines that still attempt to outwit their human counterparts? Since the analysis is not limited by this video, it begins with you.